Doctor, before maybe you can start.
Yeah.
Yesterday as we were talking about the assignment, we have not yet formed groups. I don't know who is in charge of forming the groups, but I've been trying to contact them on the WhatsApp platform. I think I've not yet gotten any response. I don't know who is in charge maybe to help us, because some of us have not yet joined the groups. We don't know our members, and we need to do that work.
Your IS, eh?
Yes, not IS, ICT management.
ICT.
Kato.
Yes.
A group for ICT management, and we put a quorum for groups. So I think you should join the group, then you will be sorted there.
Okay, I've not yet seen that document. I have not yet seen
just get into the group for ICT management. Just get into the group.
Okay. The WhatsApp group?
Yeah, WhatsApp group.
I am already there.
But there is why would
there is this other one that it's joined, IS and
not the general. Not the general. The list is already stated. Let me repost it if you're in the group.
Okay, just repost it. There is this other group here that has both ICT management and IS.
No, there is ICT itself. Remember, the IS guys said they have a group, so we formed the ICT itself. So, and we already did, we did what? We posted like 5 groups for someone to post himself where they belong. You get where they need to be.
Oh, just help me and post that, repost it in this group where there is MSICT and MSIS 2022. Then I will join the other one.
Let me just send you a link for IS itself.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, let's begin. I'm going to share my screen. So I think this is where we left off yesterday, when we were talking about case study, how the case study research method and how it relates to others. So one, we start by noting that you have a case. Within that case, you may be studying a group, a particular aspect. That's what we say, a portrait. It could be some business processes you're studying, whatever it is, or you could be studying an individual or individuals. Just here to take a note, they just show you that someone can actually study one individual. There was a research seminar I attended some years back, and in this seminar there was a young lady from Tanzania who was carrying out ethnography research. Yeah, I think it was ethnography, and specifically in the field of gender. So she was studying. She wanted to look at the gender perspective, or from a woman who is in a mixed race marriage in Tanzania. So she went ahead and studied one individual, one individual, and in that time she spent a year with this woman. This woman was I think a white lady married to a Tanzanian man, and so she was trying to get her from the gender perspective, what is her reality as a woman, as a white woman, and things like that. So she told us that she spent 1 year with this woman, going with her to hospital appointments, whatever it was, as she was studying her. So this is a typical example of ethnography together with a case study. Now, within this case study, like we were saying, you could be studying an individual, a particular aspect, a group, or you could be studying a phenomena. So this phenomena could be this particular portrait. Whatever it is, you're studying it within this this case study. Yes, Ogola, you have a question.
Thank you, Doctor. It is just in reference to if you're studying an individual, a study of an individual. My question is, what are the chances of your of that individual remaining realistic when they know they are being studied, they know they are under watch? What are the chances of this individual like living in their reality so that your research is not maybe maybe so that your research results are not tampered with from her actual reality, the day-to-day reality?
Okay, thanks, Sogola, for that question. Now, first things first, remember, one of the first things we must remember is when one is doing especially qualitative research, it's the perspective or the experience of the participant that matters. It's not necessarily you the researcher. You the researcher must remain as objective as possible. That's one. Two, the other thing is also to see at the space of time it takes, 1 whole year. Imagine spending 1 whole year with an individual. I don't think it's possible to keep up an act, should I say in quotes, keep up a certain act. So I think that's why the need for length of time. And also the other thing is the importance of applying theory, because theory helps you to pick out what is necessary and what is not necessary when you're using a theoretical framework, to discard what may be relevant and what may be relevant to your research. But then again, of course, that fear, what you're stating, Ogola, is right. It's very valid, and in reality, in any research, first and foremost, in any research, whenever we're doing any research, be it quantitative, be it qualitative, there is always the concern that this is not conclusive information. That concern is always there. One of the first things we learned, I remember at undergraduate level, is that when we're reporting our results, we normally say, based on this, that this probably means this. When we're reporting back, we don't say with conclusiveness that this probably means this. That is one. Two, yesterday we talked about, let me see if I can go back, triangulation. Yeah, the importance of triangulation. Now, the person who spent 1 year, she probably spent it observing. Now, this same person can decide to have an in-depth interview or several in-depth interviews. Of course, now in the case of one person, the online survey doesn't make sense. But these two, having these two, and probably think of another, like for example, for observation, have several observations at the same time. Let's say if you're following an individual for a year, also follow them together with their spouse, should I say, or follow them when they're with other people, and observe them in different scenarios. Ultimately, something will come out, some truth will come out. So it is important, it is very, very important that you have several data collection methods so that you carry out that triangulation to validate the findings that you have. So one, triangulation. Two is the length of time you spend with that particular thing that you're trying to research, the length of time that you try to research. And three, as you report back, the language you use. You don't state that this is the gospel truth. So this probably means, that's the language we normally use when we're reporting back. But based on these findings, this probably means this. Yeah. So you don't cast it in stone that this is the absolute truth. And you leave room for another researcher to come and validate your findings as well. You remember the story I think I repeated in I think one of the first lectures, where there were some researchers who came out and said that they had found that for someone to have same-sex attraction, that means someone to have homosexual tendencies, that it was it was based on your genes, on your DNA, and they published their research. So they published it together with their research, not just their results, but their methodology. And other researchers came and replicated it, and they found it to be false. So that's one of the reasons why we number one, we publish how we carried out our research design, our methodology, and our findings, so that somebody else can do the same research and then find out if it is true, if your findings are really true. Ogola, have I answered your question?
Yes, doctor. Thank you.
Okay, so let's move on. So this particular writer, Robert Yin, has done quite a bit of work on case study research. So you can go ahead and Google him, go to Google Scholar and search him on case study research. So he has written quite extensively about it, explaining it, what it is, its definition, and what it is, how it plays out. So one of course, its definition is all the things we've been discussing. You're researching a phenomena, a contemporary phenomena, something that is happening at a specific time. So this is where you see qualitative research can really be cross-sectional, because it's happening at a specific time. It is real life, and in a real life context. And it is also like it's also one of the things that is clear is the phenomena, what it is you're studying, and its contexts are not visible, and there's not a clear demarcation between the phenomena and the context. So we really want to study the phenomena and its context. So you do the case study research when you really want to find out how the context affects a particular phenomena. So go back to, for instance, the action research paper that we saw. That is a very good example, and we really want to know how the context affects a particular phenomena, or how the relationships play out. So mostly it's about trying to understand. There are different types of case studies. Most of us go for the illustrative case studies when we say this is typical of what I'm trying to study. For example, if I'm looking at e-learning and institutions of higher learning, and then let's say I choose UMU or UCU or KIU or IUI, whichever of them, that becomes a typical representation of other institutions of higher learning, more specifically universities. There are exploratory or pilot case studies. This is when we want to implement an instance, but we start with cases where we first, before we move to a large scale or implementation. Then we have cumulative, or sometimes referred to as multiple cases, when you use multiple cases to study something. So take an example, if someone was studying telecommunication companies and mobile services. So someone may say, I'm going to study only MTN. Another person says, no, I'm going to study MTN, Airtel, and maybe M-Pesa. M-Pesa is with Safari, I think. And those become multiple cases that one is studying. Now, we also have critical instance case studies. This is when we study one or more sites. So this is quite similar to the cumulative case, but with this particular, is if you're looking at the cause and effect questions. Yeah, so that is case study in a nutshell. Do we have any question on case study research method?
Yes, doctor.
Yes, please.
Yes, I'm Francis, and asking about, I need more light about the pilot study. So
the pilot study.
Yeah, I need more light on that. Yes, yes.
Okay. Now, there are situations. Let me give an example of usually ICT4D implementations, especially those which are done at national level. So there are situations, let's say, Ministry of Health would like to implement maybe a particular application, but they begin with a pilot case study. So they might say maybe Masaka district is the pilot case study, or they even zero down to a particular county within Masaka or sub-county within Masaka, and they say this will be our case study, our pilot case study. And they implement it and they study how that particular implementation is going to react to the context in terms of the users, in terms of the business processes, in terms of costs, looking at resources, whatever it is, they use that time to study. Then based on the findings of that research, they will do an upscale to other areas. Yeah, so that that initial pilot study guides the upscaling your implementation to other areas that are of similar context definition. Francis, I don't know if I've answered your question.
Yes, you have answered it. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. So now we come to design science, and this one is one of the most important for IS and ICT researchers who are building instances. Francis, you had Eddie, you had a question?
Yes, Doctor, good morning.
Good morning to you.
And my question is, can a case study be conducted at the same time with a cross-sectional design in the same study?
Now, the first thing is to ask, what is cross-sectional research? Remember when we talked about cross-sectional and longitudinal, we're talking about time frame. So cross-sectional is happening within a particular time, at now, it's happening now. And longitudinal, you're picking results over a period of time. So now a case study research is a typical example when you're studying cross-sectional research. It's happening now.
Okay.
Eddie, I don't know if you've got me there. It's a typical example of a cross-sectional research. It's happening at this particular time, in this particular context.
Okay, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, Doctor.
You're welcome. So now let's come to design science. So these two, the two remaining research methods are particularly for IS and ICT researchers, especially those that are designing artifacts, whether it's a system, a framework, a model, whatever it is. As long as you're designing an artifact, these are the two research methods that are extremely important. Now, bear in mind that you can combine these two methods with any of the others. Yeah, for example, you can combine design science together with case study, design science together with action research, action research together with case study. You combine them, you don't use just one independent of the other. Okay. So now when we're looking at design science, one of the writers that is extremely important is this gentleman here, Hefner. He has written quite extensively about design science, and you can go ahead and again also search him and articles on design science. I've uploaded for you some, but please go ahead and read more about this. Yeah. So this is where we in design science, we look at relevant human problems in relation to innovations or innovative artifacts. Yeah. So now, Eddie, look at the keyword innovative. Yeah. So remember the questions things we talked about. A system is not a research; it's an innovation, and this is one of the key points we want to bring out. It's an innovation. It's part of the research process, but it's not the contribution to research. The process of trying to solve the human problem and designing and implementing the innovation is when we actually make that process is when we study, we evaluate, we study, we observe, and then we make a contribution to the body of knowledge. Yeah, we make that contribution. So again, I would point you back to, for instance, the action research paper. That should be that should guide you on what it is I'm trying to point out. Joshua, you have a question?
Yes, Doctor, good morning, and thank you for the presentation. I just want to use some more light on the word artifact. I'm not understanding it very well.
Okay. What is an artifact? What is an artifact? If I could just ask someone, if any of you could, where you are, if you can just Google it and look for artifact. What is an artifact? Just Google it. Here I found something, usually a simple object such as a tool or ornament showing human workmanship or modification as disguised from a natural object. Yeah, and there are some here. I've also found something on Google, examples of artifacts: stone tools, pottery, vessels, metal objects such as weapons, and items of personal endowment as buttons, jewelry. So any innovation, yeah, that's the most generic term that I can think of, any innovation. At the same time, I also want to take you back to the term technology, because when we talk about things like weapons, these are all technology. If we look at Alemann's tools of use, like a stick to poke in and pick something, that's a tool. Any tool, any anything that we think of. And if you go back to, you connect this to the term technology, technology goes even further to say it is knowledge, it is a process, it is anything that is supposed to help solve a problem. So an example would be a system. For example, if you developed a digital system, if you developed a mobile application, that's an artifact. If you developed a new procedure, that's an artifact. For example, a framework to help implement something, a model to help design something sustainable. All those are artifacts. They are tools that are meant to be used. Term, for example, the term theory, it's an artifact. Some of the tools I was telling you about yesterday, things that I used in my research. If you look at the business model field, there are a number of tools that have been developed to help design sustainable business models for businesses, for mobile applications like Canvas, Stuff, and there are many others. So all those are artifacts. Yeah. Have I answered your question?
Doctor.
Yes, please.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay. Eddie, you have a question?
Doctor, it's not a question as such, but I will do such. Okay, I think the best way to understand an artifact is if you can call it an output. You do research when you have something like you're going to produce at the end. Let's say system is an output.
Yes.
Just
yes.
It's an innovation. Yeah. It may not necessarily be something like a tool, but if you are intending at producing an output at the end.
Yes. Okay, well, all research must have an output at the end. It could be suggestions, it could be recommendations. But okay, yeah, it's new knowledge basically.
Okay. I'm trying to say something. Actually, some people say something tangible.
Yes, it's something tangible that can be used. Yes, it is a tool that can actually be used.
Yes.
Yes, there was another hand up. Kalule.
Yeah, thank you, Doctor. To add on that about artifact, Doctor, I think it is a new development. For example, when you were talking about the early man and whatever, it was a new development in that era. So
yes.
When we come back to technology, a new development, for example, in technology, if you hear people talking about weapons, they have developed this, they have developed drones, those are artifacts because
Yes.
yeah, they haven't been around, so they have been invented, new development, a new innovation. I think that can also describe an artifact in terms of technology.
Yes, yeah. Thank you very much. Okay, I think now we've understood what artifact is. The artifact is itself. And I think also the other thing I've emphasized over and over again is the actual contribution as you develop this artifact, what the contribution that you bring out as the researcher. So, we now begin to see where our research falls, and specifically a research method that is designed for us as ICT, IS students, design science. It's extremely important. There are several principles that guide this artifact. I'll leave you to read through the articles. They are quite elaborate in explaining design science. And please go ahead and read through them. Yeah. So we want to look at design science in terms of, yes, one artifact. There's first of all a problem. Let's begin with a problem. This problem is perceived by certain persons within us, that means within a certain context. Then the ICT person designs the artifact to address the problem, and the person uses the artifact. So I think this is a perfect explanation for the discussion we've just had. But now, where does research itself come in? So we begin by identifying a problem. So there are two levels of identifying the problem here. And I think the article on action research explains it well. The first is within the context. Yeah, the first is within the context itself, a particular practical problem. And then the second is in research, what is being pointed out by research, the lack of knowledge in terms of research. So this becomes the motivation for why we are doing our research. So then we set out an objective which has a solution. So you first of all have a research question, a question that needs to be answered. Remember, for the action research paper, the question was that there was evidence, there was some suggestion that there are real life situations, real life forces which affect effective use of these artifacts when they are implemented. That is the groupware artifacts when they are implemented within an organization. So their actual research question was, what are those forces? They wanted to find out what those forces were. Although in that there was an actual need that was identified within the context, but the research question was there, and that research question then and plus this motivation drives the objective. So the objective was to implement the groupware application with the intention of studying workplace forces. So that was the objective. Justin, I think let me mute you. Thank you. So objective, so we have that objective. So that objective responds to requirements. Now, there's also an article which I've also attached. It's one of the articles, I think, which was first given to me when I was doing my research. It points out the different steps we make. We make assumptions and requirements. We do assumptions of what could possibly exist within a context, and then we come up with requirements. We design and develop an artifact, we demonstrate or we implement. Demonstration is basically implementation. And during implementation, we evaluate. Now, one of the key points I want to ask you is that one of the articles I've attached, I think I'll try to get the proper title, and it actually says, in actual sense, we evaluate throughout. We evaluate continuously. As we do, especially as we are designing, we carry out an evaluation. Yeah, we can actually carry out an evaluation on paper and then evaluation within the real life context. And when we do that final evaluation, this evaluation is what we publish. Okay, that's what we communicate out to the research world. Now, you notice the people who did the paper on action, the action research paper, you notice that they didn't give you specifications of how Lotus Notes works. You didn't see screenshots, but they reported about the findings in the real life context, the forces that worked against successful implementation and uptake of the groupware application. They published, what they were publishing about is the findings within the context. That is what they communicated. Yes, Eddie.
Yes, Doctor, if we may go back to that paper of Lotus Note.
Yes.
The problem you told us that these people were addressing, I don't know, but personally I saw something different. It was a little bit related to what you told us.
Mm-hmm.
But when I read that paper, I saw something like the problem was okay. I stated it like this: there was an insufficient communication and collaboration among senior managers.
Yes.
Okay, that's, to me, that's how I could state.
Yes. Now, Eddie, remember when we looked at the definition of action research and so on and so forth? Within the case, there's a need, an actual need that has been identified, okay? A need, but it's not a research problem. Eddie, I don't know if you're getting me. It's not a research problem. It's an organizational problem, but it's not a research problem, okay? Let me go back. Let me just go back to the paper briefly. Sorry, everyone just give me a minute. I first pull out this paper. Now, Eddie, you talked about the need. Look at this. This is where you got this from. Although there was a real need for change and the project received strong support from senior management on the basis that it would enable radical changes in coordination within the groupware. These radical changes did not occur. In other words, they didn't see that efficiency happening. The authors analyze the reasons for failure and suggest that the project failed because of institutional forces which exhibit drastic changes in work habits. Now, let me go further. Here, in this first paragraph, the authors talk about the significance of ICT in general, bringing about dramatic change and improving work processes. Yeah, they talk about that general significance of ICT. That's just a general significance. It's not a research significance. It's a general significance of ICT in our everyday lives. And this is, of course, this is what makes research so important in any field, whether in healthcare or so on and so forth. Now, Let's come to the second paragraph. Yeah. They say,
Yes.
until recently, most previous research in the area of groupware has used laboratory experiments in artificial situations. Notice they says previous research. Okay? He's not talking about organizational problems. He's talking about research. He says most of the previous research in the area of groupware has used laboratory experiments. Why do the authors take pains to point out what other research has done in the area of groupware and the methodology that was used? Why do they take pains to do that? Because these authors are trying to point out to you their research contribution. And here I am emphasizing the word research, not organizational problems. Research. Okay? They tell you that's the previous research. Then they, in this sentence, they say, work is starting to emerge. They say, first of all, this sentence that follows says, as a general rule, much of this research has suggested that positive effects can be derived. They say the research suggested positive effects can be derived from the use of groupware. Then they say, however, here, work is starting to emerge, however, which suggests there may be significant counter forces which exist to maintain the status quo in organizations. Yeah? There is certain research work that is emerging that says there are counter forces which will refuse to adopt, which will curtail or will hinder adoption and effective use of these groupware applications. Therefore, hindering the positive effects that are hoped for. Then they go out to say, many IS researchers, you see here, he's talking about IS researchers, have pointed out the broader social and organizational context within which information technology is implemented has profound influence on the way IT is used. Yeah? So they have said broader research, and it even goes ahead and quotes those researchers who have suggested that there are certain issues that influence the way IT is used. Yeah? Now they go ahead and say the action research project discussed in this paper was motivated by the desire to more fully understand the relationship between the introduction of groupware and changes in work habits and organizational structure. Eddie, you notice he didn't say we were motivated by the challenge senior management is going through. Do you notice that?
Yes.
Yeah, that was not the motivation. It made the organization the ideal case study. Yeah, it made the organization where they implemented the project the ideal case study. But it was not the research motivation. The research motivation was to fully understand the relationship between the introduction of groupware and changes in work habits and the organizational structure of an organization. Now, if you even want to go further, Eddie, look throughout this paper. They don't even give you screenshots about Lotus Notes. They don't talk about its application, the language that was used to develop it. They don't talk about it. If you look through the paper, they don't talk about the innovation itself. The discussion is not about that. Eddie, I don't know if you get my point. This is something that I really, really, really want to emphasize to IS and ICT researchers. So Eddie, what I want to notice is understand that they saw the need within that organization. That's why they picked it as a case study. But that was not the motivation for the research.
Okay.
I hope you get that point.
Yes, doctor.
Okay. Let's go back. So basing on that discussion, I hope we understand design science. Do we understand it, or it's more confusing?
Yeah, you've given a good understanding so far.
We do understand design science, and we shall understand it after reading
and using it. Hopefully, you'll understand
yes.
more
No,
you'll actually understand
maybe
it more as you use it.
No, we've been using it, but we've been unaware
that you are using it.
That we are using it, but
yeah.
Now maybe we shall try to read about it and practically use it when we know everything about it.
Okay, let me come to the next method, which is action design research. Now, let me just take you back to the previous slide and point out something to show you the motivation for the developers of action design research. You notice this is very much, action design science is very much a top-down affair. Yeah, the power seems to lie in the hands of the developer. Okay?
Yes.
Yeah, the power seems to lie in the hands of the developer. And the context, the users don't seem to have much say in the artifact itself, the artifact that has been developed. Yeah? This was the motivation for action design research. The developers of this research method, and this I'll point out this particular gentleman, this Sain and his colleagues, they also wrote quite a bit of notes on action design science, design research. Also, but I also shared that article with you. So these people, these particular researchers say that the design science started from top to bottom. But they said many times systems fail to work. Their argument was that innovations fail to work because we start from the top down. But what about if we start from the bottom going up? We start with the context, designing an innovation from the bottom going up. And in that process, we participate, the researcher participates in the process of implementation, of the designer, the participants participate in the process of developing an artifact, and in that time, the researcher takes time to reflect and report back all throughout the stages. So what these researchers did, they combined action research together with design science and came up with action design research. So this particular method is highly qualitative in nature. It's possible to use design science in a quantitative perspective, but action design science is highly qualitative in nature. So for it, it combines theory and practice by focusing on the two goals of action research, which is practice, the practical problem, and participation. So there are several principles that action research, action design science follows, but the article I've given you emphasizes them better. So first and foremost, it is motivated by the real world problems. Just like any design science situation, motivated by real world problems. So again, if you look at the action research paper that we looked at, so it borrows very much from action research. So we start with a real world problem. So the real world, the solution can come from the context itself, or from the participants themselves, or the solution can come from the designer brings the initial design to the context, the participants say, no, we want this, we don't want that, something like that. Either it can come from either sides, the solution can come from either sides. So I'll give you an example again of my research, where I used action design science. I remember when I first had my first idea of the application, and I went to Nkozi Hospital to present. And I remember the first thing, the doctors raised their hands. One doctor raised his hand and she said that, my dear, who do you think has time to sit and make VoIP phone calls to patients? We don't have that time here. Of course, as an IT person, I was crushed, but as a researcher, this was a very good input, because it began to show me the real world context, what the users really experience as ICT users. It gave me, and those were the first reflections I used to remodify the application. Yeah, those were the first real world. So I went back on paper, then brought it again, studied again, got those reflections, and those reflections are what helped build the model that I came out with at the end. Yeah. So you see, in that process, the researcher begins to investigate how the technology solutions can be used to improve the organizational processes, and you achieve better results because you're starting from the bottom going up. Sorry. So that is the problem formulation process. Now, we don't just design the artifact, we also apply theory. Yeah. So we apply theory as we design our artifact, as we study, we design the artifact, and also as we study the context. This is where the theoretical framework comes in. You remember the article for action research, the theoretical framework they used? So you apply theory in this process. Remember when I also gave you the experience of my research where I applied livelihood framework, and I also applied the STOF model. So this was theory application. So that theory application, number one, keeps you within limits so that you don't go out of context. Two, this is when you begin to formulate and identify your variables that will that you will eventually report back. That's the new knowledge that you report back. Yeah. So here, I've put some examples of a theory like TAM. Those in ICT, we talked about things like TOGAF. Others can look at, some of you can look at a theory called SAM. SAM, this one specifically looks at alignment of ICT strategy to organizational strategy. That's another theory you can look at. So these are all theories that we can use, and there are many that others that you'll find, most likely that myself, I don't even know. There are others like design actuality gaps. That is also another theory that was developed for ICT 4D, but you can also, I've seen it being used in ICT governance for public sectors, public sector evaluations. It's also another theory. So in that time, when you apply the artifact, you also use theory. Then you have the second stage, which is the build stage. So you have the problem formulation, then you have the build. So the build is called the intervention and evaluation process. Yeah. So again, it's very much, you can see that design science now combined together with action research. So we build, again, you could have said by building the artifact first, or you would have edited it or redesigned it based on the intervention, that the first intervention you have. So in this time period of intervention, you build, you intervene to solve the real world problem, but in that process, you evaluate. Yeah. So the outcome of this process is the realized design of the artifact, the final artifact. But during this time, you have continuous evaluation. So what you report back are the design principles. Yeah, not the artifact, but the design principles that you have identified, that the other ICT or IS designers need to consider when they are designing this type of artifact for that specific type of context. Yeah, for similar contexts. So take an example, it could be an e-learning application being put in an institution of higher learning. You can also, someone else can be studying an e-learning implementation in a commercial organization. You realize that for some organizations, they also actually carry out e-learning for purposes of training, continuous training. They actually have e-learning implementations. My sister works for a consultancy firm, and they carry out trainings for organizations, big organizations like Stanbic and ABSA and so on and so forth, a human resource training, and they use e-learning resources quite extensively. So you can imagine that's not, one would think one can decide to study those e-learning implementations in that purely commercial setting. So the final stage is reflection and learning. So or rather, this is the stage we would go through in the evaluation stage, but this is when we concretize what we have learned, the perspectives of the researchers, what we have seen, and we report back to the academic world. Any questions so far? Or have I confused you further?
I think we shall read those notes on our own and then try to get our own understanding and reflect what you're giving us here.
Okay, okay. So,
yes, Doctor.
Yes.
Okay, okay, this one is not about this, but it is about the cross-section, cross-sectional research design. There is something I read about sometime, and it was to do with, because you've just said that it is cross-sectional, we study something that is happening now.
Yes.
And I remember I read something to do with the retrospective and the prospective, prospective study within the case, within the cross-sectional study. And it was saying that for retrospective, it studies something that happened sometime back, and then for prospective, you study something that is likely to happen in the future. And then it has that now aspect in the middle, and that's why it's cross-sectional. Having those are the three aspects: the past, the present, and the future. And when you are discussing, you didn't mention anything about this.
Okay. Now, Eddie, you pull out everything. You want everything to be discussed. Now, let me give you an example of retrospective study. Yeah. Something that has happened in the past. And here, when I look, just Google it, it says in most cases, some or most of the data has already been gathered and stored in registry. Okay, let me give you an example. Let us say a statistical researcher goes to UBOS and wants to do a cross-sectional study on income levels in 1999. Just for that period. They can pull out that data and study it. Yeah, and give a report back. So they are basically using secondary data.
Yes.
So that is an example of cross-sectional.
You see,
it is coming out from one specific time. Now, the other one we are talking about, what we are talking about is research that is happening right now. So you can study the past, you can study the present.
And a prospective view of it.
Yeah, the prospective view of it is most likely that is going to be quantitative, because you'd have to have some kind of theory that predicts what is going to happen. Okay.
Now, Doctor,
in all cases, Eddie, it's happening within a specific time. Yeah, it's happening within a specific time. The examples I was giving you is research that is happening now. Now, of course, Eddie, if you want me to mention it, I would mention it. Okay? But what's the likelihood you're going to do it for your masters?
You see, Doctor, there is something I've just experienced I think last month. There was a colleague of mine who was writing her master's research with one of the universities. These are universities under UNICAF.
What is UNICAF?
I always see it on the internet advertising, but there are universities in the UK that offer master's degree programs online. So these people we are dealing with us, actually, they were restricted to secondary data. And they are required to carry out their studies based on secondary data.
Yeah.
Which was very it was purely qualitative. Though some people could not tell, because according to the reports I got a chance to look at, they are basically mixing qualitative and quantitative.
Yeah, that's mixed method.
Mixed methods, for which I believe you cannot do a mixed method based on secondary data. So when we are doing this study, we we focused on retrospective as an aspect of a cross-sectional design. And this is when I came to know about these three aspects of cross-section. So when you discussed cross-section, I never mentioned anything about this. I thought it would be injustice to my colleagues, because most of them are just studying research for the first time. I don't know.
I don't think they're studying research for the first time. If you've done any bachelor's degree, it's not the first time. Number two, Eddie, when we are teaching, we don't teach everything. Because if we do teach everything, then we are taking you as empty objects that need to be filled. But you're not empty objects. Okay? Yes. One, Eddie, remember that we are studying a course in 6 weeks. 6 weeks, in which time you're not just coming here for me to pump you with information. You're also expected to go and study by yourself. You're expected to do coursework. You're expected to do your own reading, personal reading, and you're also expected to do a final assessment. So how much information would you like me to give you? Just look at the simple thing, Eddie, I've tried to push forward of an innovation is not an artifact, is an artifact, or rather an ICT or IS innovation is not a research contribution. How long has it taken you to get that point? That even today, I started talking about this 3 weeks ago, but even today you are still emphasizing on it. But that point itself, it has taken you a long time. I'm not even sure if you've let go of that feeling. So you want me to pump you with how many things at this time? If that most significant thing, even up to now, you're failing to let go of it.
Okay, doctor.
Doctor, we understand you.
There isn't so much I can pump you with. What the first and most important thing, I know for me, when my colleagues handed me these modules for research methods, one of the most important things is to try and harmonize research in the department, so that also when you go back to your supervisor, you at least have the most fundamental knowledge to begin. So that by the time, even when you're presenting your concept paper to your supervisor the first time, you have the most fundamental. But if I start going irrelevant here, asking for retrospective, introspective, and so on and so forth, how many of you are actually going to use that data? That's the first and most important question I would like to ask. How many of you? Most of you, I know, especially in IS, will gravitate towards a system, an application or something. In ICT, I know most people will gravitate towards frameworks and interoperability and so on and so forth. So that's why I try my level best to keep it short and sweet, so that we don't confuse people even further. That's one of the reasons. So anyway, back to this. Let us look at the final step of action design research, where we formalize our learning. So after reflection and learning, we formalize the learning. Now, here is one of the most important things when we are dealing with especially case study research. I remember one of the first discussions I had with you was about the need to globalize your problem. For example, I remember Ogola talked about the issue of regulation and Bank of Uganda. I'd had another discussion with somebody else about, let's say, e-learning in UMU. You've noticed something, e-learning in UMU or something like that. Now, the first thing we do is, let's take the problem out of the place you first observed it, or the context which you would like to choose as your case study. Yeah, this is when we take the organizational problem we have observed and we take it out of the context in which we have first observed it. Why is it so important? Because we are going to generalize our findings to other areas. Yes, we are going to generalize our findings to other areas. So let us say somebody has done research on e-learning in UMU, but ultimately they have to relate their findings to other institutions of higher learning. So the problem instance must be generalized. The solution must also be generalized. The derived design principles for the research, when the researcher reports them, this should be used by others who are not necessarily in the case study context, by others who are experiencing the same problem. Yeah, so that's one of the reasons, that's one of the significant things, is you come out of your case study. When you start writing about your research in chapter 1, divorce yourself from where you first observed. We shouldn't see, let's say if there's somebody talking about e-learning in UMU, we should not see that person discussing Uganda Matters University is a private, not-for-profit, Catholic founded, it's experiencing such and such a problem. We shouldn't be seeing that. Yeah. you notice the paper on action research, although it's a paper, it's not a thesis, it's a paper. I remember someone talked about thesis yesterday and I wanted to explain it, but I'll explain it probably at the end of this lecture, what a thesis is. You look at the action research paper, it talks about the organization. They actually don't even mention the organization where they carried out the implementation. I just saw it was an organization in New Zealand, a firm in New Zealand. Now, why is it important? They in their discussions, they talk about other researchers actually pointing out that there are always influences on IT instances implemented within organizations. And sometimes these affect the positive, the expected positive effects that ICT implementations are supposed to have. So those positive effects are those forces you could see was the focus of their research, the generalization that these forces exist elsewhere. So even you in your discussion, by the time you talk about your actual case study, one should see it in your chapter 3 when you're talking about your methodology, when you describe your case study area. They shouldn't see it in chapter 1. Right from chapter 1, you should begin the generalization of the problem, generalization of the solution. You notice again in the action research paper, they kept talking about groupware applications. They didn't focus it on Lotus Notes because there are many groupware applications. Imagine that was in 1999. How have groupware applications evolved? To what level? That's the importance of generalizing your problem and your solution, so that the design principles you would have noted and that you're reporting back, those design principles can be generalized to other cases. Any questions so far?
Not really, Doctor.
Okay. So far, that was our discussion on research methods. Now, this is just an extra diagram, but you can find it in one of the articles that describes action design research, the process that one goes through, but you can read that further. Just as a disclaimer to edit, these are not the only research methods, there are many more, but again, I've kept it limited. Grounded theory is actually one of the other research methods, but I didn't raise it because there's a limited likelihood that you're going to use it. It's going to be of practical use to you right now. And don't worry, for all those who may be worried that I'm not teaching everything. Every single day is a learning process. Every single day is a learning process. So even you see me here, every single day there's something new that I'm learning. Every single day there's something new that I'm learning. You'll not get everything from the classroom. That's not possible. In teaching and learning, that's what we say. One of the things we've been trained at university level is that don't take your students to be empty pots that it's you now going to fill. Number one, students come with their own knowledge. Number two, learning is continuous. That is why I would rather teach you Google Scholar so that you go to teach yourself some of these things rather than me imagining that I'm the source of all information. That is not possible. So,
but, Doctor, for me, even in my opinion, I believe at this master's level, it should be more inclined to, for us, what we are digging in for ourselves, maybe you can just come in to guide us here and there without having to rely on you to give us all these things. It is practically impossible.
Yeah, that is true. Okay, thank you, everyone. I'm going to ask you kindly today if we can end early, because I have a patient that I need to take to hospital, and he's a bit far from me. I need to travel to his place and then head there and have a look at him. And rather, not. I'm actually going to take him somewhere. Mawejo, you have a question?
I was saying that is granted. Life fast.
Thank you very much.
It is okay, Doctor. We can use this time for us, and then we see how we can proceed with our assignments.
Okay.
And try to be productive.
Thank you. Let me just
Doctor,
share.
an inquiry.
Yes, please.
An inquiry, Doctor.
Yes, please.
Yeah, Doctor. Sorry, yesterday I joined late evening. I was caught up somewhere. I don't know, what did you talk about our presentations? When are we presenting? I don't know whether they presented.
Now, thank you for that question. One, I've put up the assignment in Moodle. It is under literature review and problem formulation. This is the assignment. If you open it up, it gives the instructions. So you present your findings on the 24th. So 24th should be on Saturday. So Friday we shall have our lecture. Saturday you do your presentation. I asked that you upload your selected assignments, preferably on the 19th. 19th is when? Is Monday. Preferably you can upload it then. And I've created a second link, file uploads. So you can create a zipped file. Just two articles will be enough. And you can upload your files. Now, if you help me and send me your groups. If you help me and send me your groups early, I will input the group so that only one member needs to upload. Only one member of the group can upload the zipped file.
Doctor, I have a question.
Yes, please.
This date that you said, 19th.
Yeah.
That is going to be on Monday? On Monday, yes.
Yes.
Is this the time you want us to put our answers there?
No. Just the articles you've selected. Just the articles you've selected.
Okay.
Yeah. Just the two articles. The assignment itself is to be presented and submitted on I put here 24th.
By 24th?
Yes. This is on the 24th.
So I think in our respective courses, because now what we did, we split up ICT management and IS. Whoever maybe has not yet added his name there should just add the name, and then hopefully by the end of today we can send to you those WhatsApp the groups. I mean.
Yes, please. That will be good. Thank you. Emma, is Emma there? Emma, I don't know if it may not be right now on the PC, but I've shared with Emma the videos, the recordings of yesterday. So if you can upload them on YouTube and send me the links, I'll link them. And I'll also do the one for today, send it to him as soon as possible.
Okay.
Francis is, how do we submit the assignment response? Again, also on Moodle, as a PowerPoint. If it's a PowerPoint presentation, that is okay. Just a small PowerPoint presentation. There are very few questions that I've given you. Alice is asking, where is the assignment on Moodle? So any other question?
I think the rest of the work we can just maybe check through Moodle and read through and see.
Okay.
And then When it comes to the clarification, maybe you can just clarify something small.
Okay.